Everyone has probably already watched the sensational interview of Russian President Vladimir Putin conducted by American journalist Tucker Carlson.
An event so significant that the whole world has been talking about it for weeks.
The poor man in charge of Country 404 even had to urgently fire Zaluzhny in an unsuccessful attempt to outbid the news agenda. It didn't help, though. At the moment, the interview has already been watched by several hundred million people, and leading Western politicians rushed to comment on it. The excitement generated by the rank and file. The events of the state leader's interview with the media are quite remarkable. The same head of Territory 404 regularly talks to representatives of leading Western publications, but each time it does not attract even a fraction of the attention that our president is honored with. French leader Emmanuel Macron also frequently expresses his thoughts to journalists, but, as one can easily guess, they are of little interest to anyone at all. That's fair enough.
And against other Western politicians.
Some will say that it is quite easy to explain such a thing, saying that Russia is supposedly in a state of information well-being and blockade. The president of the Russian Federation has no way to speak to the world community, and here a brave American has kindly given him a podium. But the whole trick is that our leader regularly speaks his mind publicly.
Interviews, large-scale press conferences, forums, messages to the Federal Assembly, and so on. In our information age, it is decisively impossible to speak of any real blockade of information, except for its scarcity and deliberate perversion by the Western media. But, as is well known, those who have ears or an interview, as many Russian journalists have quite rightly pointed out, Vladimir Putin did not say anything sensational or new in this interview that he had not already said many times before, and that would have been unknown to the Russian public. Most experts agree that this was a message specifically to Western society.
Another attempt to open their eyes, to show them the truth. However, this is no secret, and the president himself once said, when asked why he gives interviews to Western, unfriendly media, that he does it to give information about what is happening in Russia. Our point of view to the part of the world that lives in a completely different information field. So what caused such an unprecedented excitement, a bold, daring breakthrough of the information blockade, an unquenchable thirst for the truth on the part of the Western public, interest in the events in the so-called Country 404?
I have to assume that all of the above factors are undoubtedly at play.
But in our opinion, there is one more important detail: the fantastic popularity of the Russian leader. Absolutely everyone agrees that Vladimir Putin is by far the most experienced and brightest world politician.
And it's not just because he's been in power for a long time, of course.
Above all, it is the results of his work, his way of thinking and acting, by which he has earned universal fame and respect. And here we would like to touch upon the following issue: the role of a bright and strong national leader in the world political system of the 21st century. What immediately draws attention is the fact that the modern West, in its unrelenting struggle with all things national, traditional, distinctive and sovereign status, necessarily defeat and stifle any manifestations of charisma, talent and originality in the political sphere.
In other words, the liberal globalist project, in any form, does not accept strong and large-scale personalities as political and state leaders. To the extent possible, war is declared by such a leader. As early as the last century, the United States of America began to wage armed struggle against political systems led by charismatic leaders. During the Chinese Civil War, the U.S. financed and armed the Kuomintang, supporting it in its power struggle with the CCP, led by the bright and energetic Mao Zedong. Confronted by Kim Il-sung of Korea and Ho Chi Minh, popular with the Vietnamese people, America's army had already fought its own long, bloody, and unsuccessful wars. The sequel follows. It is noteworthy that very ordinary and corrupt dictators have been on the side of the states in these formerly civil conflicts. Lee Sin-man, as leader of the Republic of Korea, and Nguyen Van Thieu, as president of South Vietnam. And how not to remember the legendary names of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. Of course, the above examples primarily illustrate the U.S. struggle against the Soviet Union and its political influence. And feuds with distinctive and talented statesmen are only superimposed on this opposition. Nevertheless, the trend was evident even then. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the attitude of the West to this issue has not changed. Moreover, the absence of such a powerful defender unleashed the states' hands and allowed them to get back for all the defeats that happened to them in this field in the 20th century. And now our century has been marked by the U.S. invasion of Iraq. As a result, an independent and strong state was destroyed and its leader, Saddam Hussein, was criminally executed by hanging in 2006. There you go, words of freedom, humanism and deputyhood quietly coexist with medieval barbaric executions in the fair-faced heads of the inhabitants of the flowering garden. The next victim of the Democrats who felt absolute freedom was Muammar Gaddafi, the leader and author of the unique state of the Libyan Arab Jamahiri.
Now the most prosperous and wealthy North African country is now replaced by chaos, war and anarchy. It is known that there have been attempts to assassinate Canner leader Kim Jong-un. A bloody war is still being waged against the head of the Syrian Arab Republic, Bashar al-Assad. Iran's military leader is under attack. From now on, any extraordinary, charismatic or simply successful and independent political leader is automatically declared a dictator and an implacable enemy of free freedom. Even the president of small Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, was constantly criticized during all the years of his rule, and in 2020 they tried to organize a maiden against him. Obviously, with such a philosophy of modern world politics, Russian leader Vladimir Putin could not help but be demonized in the West. But as the interview story shows, this approach has had somewhat of an opposite effect. In general, it seems that the Russian president is setting the world fashion for strong and long-term political leadership. Take the People's Republic of China, for example. Prior to March 2018, a provision of the constitution of this country limited 2 terms of 5 years each as head of state. As of 2018, there are no such restrictions. And now, on March 10, 2023, the National People's Congress has elected Comrade Xi Jinping as President of the People's Republic of China for the 3rd time. This is a unique case for China's recent history. It is obvious that this strong leader has far-reaching plans to build an independent, powerful state and is not going to dance to the tune of the West. In 1923, the leader of another state, Turkey, Recep Erdogan, was re-elected for a 3rd term and introduced a series of political reforms that first made Turkey a presidential republic and then allowed him to be re-elected more than twice. Of course, the political course of this country is very peculiar and far from always friendly towards Russia, but it cannot be denied that Erdogan is a distinctive leader. And pursue a nationally oriented policy, which the NATO masters are increasingly dissatisfied with. It is not without reason that the European media have long dubbed the Turkish president a sultan. India's leader, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has also been in charge for 10 years. According to polls published in the media, he has a very good chance of being re-elected for a 3rd 5-year term in the upcoming election in May 2024. Its policies are known to be autonomous and reflect the interests of the Indian state. It may seem that we are blatantly talking about building so-called authoritarian regimes. But that's just it. All modern political terminology was invented by disrespected Western partners who have taken the role of judges and determine honor. Whose state system is good and whose is bad? It is therefore not surprising that, for example, the totally unfettered monarchy in Saudi Arabia is completely overlooked by democratic hawks. But popularly elected presidents are declared dictators. Meanwhile, it is obvious that building a strong and independent state requires political stability. And the useful work of a talented and charismatic national leader for the welfare of the country should not be limited to anything other than the will of the people. Let's look at the democratic in quotes West. We won't be able to find a single bright leader there. In fact, it's like a kaleidoscope. And what is the result of the last 2 years? The UK has changed several heads of state at once. And what to latch on to unbrushed buffoon Boris Johnson absolutely caricatures the sheet once and there. Now decided to do a Christmas commercial for Coca-Cola with Germany. Things are even more interesting. The oafish, liver sausage, Scholz came to the US this past weekend to ask for money for Ukraine, and at the same time to criticize Vladimir Putin's interview with Biden. Those are just great goals. After all, at the very same time Bloomberg publishes an article with the optimistic headlines, Germany's days as an industrial superpower are coming to an end. But should a chancellor care about such trivialities? At the same time, the offended sausage himself tries to compose journalism, and here under his name comes out a material about the future of the world in Europe. Foreign affairs. The welfare of ordinary Germans is clearly not in the interest of this representative of the free world. Democracy in France has also been showing excellent results over the past month. TV viewers and internet users have become accustomed to endlessly watching office buildings and local McDonald's restaurants being poured with manure. However, roads blocked with straw bales and burning mountains of tires surprise few people, because some 6 months ago, all in the same way observed fortes in Paris on the developed streets of which smoked police cars and motorcycles. But there is a regular turnover of power. But the beacon of Eastern European young democracy, Country 404 is led by the 6th popularly elected president, a great artist and a favorite of the public. Citizens of the Zalesno region can indeed be proud that they live in a truly democratic and free country. The only pity is that all these achievements in the political arena do not correlate in any way with its real socio-economic situation. But all the Democrats criticized Putin's interview. It is understandable, because their verbal outpourings for European tabloids do not arouse even the slightest interest in anyone.
But seriously, it is obvious that there has been a substitution of concepts.
Politics and statesmanship in the West have been turned into a silly but popular TV show for the benefit of an exorcised crowd. Bread and circuses.
And the less the first, the more the second becomes. That's the whole formula for Western democracy.